The Chinese Communist Party is actively making the world a more dangerous place. One of the ways is by dethroning the US as the global superpower. And to do that, the Communist Party supports authoritarian regimes around the world. The latest example, Iran. China just signed a 25-year deal with Iran worth potentially $400 billion. That money will go into a variety of Iranian projects. The usual Belt and Road stuff. Ports, oil, gas. Oh, and did I mention nuclear power? Wasn't there something about Iran and nuclear power that the world was concerned with? U.S. intelligence agencies have long suspected Iran of using its civilian nuclear program as a cover for clandestine weapons development. Basically, they're trying to make nuclear weapons. And the fun doesn't stop at nuclear technology. Iran and China will also deepen their defense cooperation, as China will transfer some military technology. Fantastic. Israel is particularly concerned about that. So what does China get out of this? Global power and influence. Oh, and oil. Iran is an international pariah. It has a horrible human rights track record. That's why Iran and China can be friends. They have so much in common. The U.S. ranks Iran as one of the top state sponsors of terrorism, not to mention its aggressive nuclear program. That's why the Trump administration put sanctions on Iran. Now the Biden administration is hoping to use those sanctions as leverage to get Iran to back off from its nuclear program. But the new Iran-China deal gives Iran a lot of power. It doesn't have to come back to the negotiating table with the U.S. if it can increase trade with China instead. In fact, already the China-Iran deal has forced the Biden administration to go a little softer on Iran. Soon after that deal was penned, Biden came to Iran with a new proposal that included more sanctions relief. Iran desperately needs sanctions relief to prop up its economy. But now it's also looking at selling more stuff to China instead of to Europe or other countries that would follow U.S. sanctions. China imports about 70% of its oil, and now more of that oil will come from Iran. In exchange for the deal, China would receive a regular and heavily discounted supply of Iranian oil. The deal helps Iran dodge American sanctions, and the cash infusion will ease economic pressure on the ruling mullahs. So more money for the Iranian regime and for Iranian-backed terrorist groups like Hezbollah. There's another part of the deal that potentially weakens the U.S. China and Iran want to create a joint bank. It's unclear how or even if this bank would work. But it's part of a bigger push by Iran, China, and Russia to break the U.S. dollar's hold on global trade and finance. Nearly all of the 71 countries that are part of China's Belt and Road Initiative have deals with China that involve U.S. dollars. And the power of the U.S. dollar is precisely why U.S. sanctions work to rein in regimes like Iran and North Korea, as well as specific Chinese officials who have been crushing democracy in Hong Kong. So for all those reasons, China and Iran teaming up is not good for the U.S. or the free world. And there's an even bigger problem. America's enemies are working together to undermine what Biden calls the rules-based international order. As the Wall Street Journal says, think Iran and Russia in Syria, or China and Russia evading United Nations sanctions to aid North Korea, or China and Russia working through Cuba to prop up Venezuela's regime. Of course, the deal is controversial even inside Iran. After all, China doesn't have a great reputation when it comes to these kinds of bilateral deals. They often end up with the other party getting stuck in a debt trap. Very little about the deal has been made public, and there's a push for more details. But an Iranian spokesperson said they have no legal obligation to publish it. The agreement was not an international treaty or agreement and does not require parliamentary approval under this legal interpretation, he said. Ah, secret deals. Always a plus when you're a dictator. By the way, that same Iranian spokesperson also hinted that China was standing in the way of publication, which is always reassuring when the Chinese regime doesn't want you to know what's in a deal.